OK, Reece, what was your take on what Tony Abbott said today?
Well, I mean, you know, Tony Abbott is still beholden to Nick Minchin, and the coalition is still beholden to Nick Minchin. He's their #1 faceless man. We're in danger of looking like a hillbilly country. I think it was pathetic. I think it's really sad and very dishonest too, because the statement that he went on to say, of saying that the rest of the world is backing away from an ETS, is just a pretty easily provable lie. And to say that, you know, that the world's, you know, that as if it's all just electricity and he's the only one who gets it, is just ludicrous in the extreme, I think.
Not to put too fine a point on it, there's also things like God, and, you know, obviously Tony Abbott has faith in God. But more importantly, I think what he was trying to do, it shows that Tony Abbott really is trying to walk both sides of the street. The coalition, of course, also has a policy to reduce emissions, these invisible emissions, by the same amount that the government does. It has an as yet uncosted policy, or we haven't seen the costings for the policy. But basically they're on the same level in terms of reducing those invisible emissions. But I think what Tony Abbott's comments today show is that he's sort of trying to have a bet each way in terms of also sucking up to the sort of the climate change deniers, if you like.
I'm looking forward to seeing the invisible trees he's going to plant too.
Tim, is he trying to pander to climate sceptics here, do you think?
No, I think he's just actually arguing the case about what the problems are around emissions trading and whether it will actually work in terms of cutting greenhouse gas emissions. I'm actually in a...
But why say it's invisible? Why say it's odourless, colourless, invisible?
Well, perhaps because some of those things are factually accurate. I mean, if you actually want to look at the free market price of CO2, I actually looked this up. It's between hang on, Reece, be quiet.
It's factually accurate. It's like saying, well, Clive Palmer's fat. It might be factually accurate, but you don't tend to say it.
Well, yeah, but there's nothing to stop you saying it at the same time. The free market price of carbon dioxide, if you actually want to talk about real market-based mechanisms, which is the free market, is between $6,000 and $9,000, because that's the cost it costs to replace a cylinder of CO2 at your local service station if you want to do it up to a tonne. So there's actually a big difference between what the government is implementing and what they're actually trying to sell to the public.
Okay,
and that's one of the that's been central and missing.
I mean, to be kind to Tony Abbott, he was perhaps trying to point out that it is, you know, it is a really massive scheme. It's a completely artificial scheme. Most money markets are, you know, all sorts of markets are, futures markets are the same. Nobody really knows how it's going to work yet. There's a lot of chopping and changing, and it is quite confusing, I suppose.
But there is a fundamental difference between these, which is that this is purely a regulatory impost, and they've dressed it up in all of this language around markets to say we're going to allocate it more efficiently by deciding who...
I mean, it is a market.
I'm not disputing it's a market, but I'm saying it's not like a futures market, which is actually about risk hedging based on real things that exist, that would exist whether or not the government imposed the regulatory cost.
OK, Reece, I want to come to you on Labor's policy here. Why has Kevin Rudd decided to bring this forward when it seems like the heat had gone out of this issue? Kevin Rudd is going very well in the polls. Suddenly he's got a problem to find this money in the budget. Why does he need to do this?
Well, I think firstly, just to answer the you know, the attack on Rudd that he should have gone to a double dissolution to get the ETS on the table after the Greens and others had sabotaged it. He's obviously wanted to get that in, you know, quicker and move you know, bump it up a year ahead, get there. I know that you're taking a risk with the $6 billion, but it certainly takes a little bit of the sting out of Tony Abbott's tail as far as, you know, he's been calling, you know, axe the tax, axe the tax. Finally, Rudd axes the tax, and he still hates Rudd for axing the tax. I mean, it takes some of the sting out of that that argument. But I think we should remember that, like, that the coalition were very strongly in favour of an ETS pre-Tony Abbott and pre-being beholden to the puppet master Nick Minchin. So let's not just forget those days as if they never happened.
You're like the president of Nick Minchin's fan club trying to build him up or something, because I think you're completely off beam on this one.
Really?
Like, I hate to break it. Nick Minchin's a top bloke, but I don't think he's sitting behind the scenes being the puppet master that you're making out to be. No offence, Nick, you know.
So? So it's the IPA, it's not Nick Minchin.
OK, yeah, fine, it's us then. Let's go with that.
Jackie, there is a number of questions here, though.
I think, given that they're in deficit anyway, and given this tax is so unpopular, I'm not saying that it's good policy to move so quickly to the emissions trading scheme, but I don't think, I mean, this decision is completely reverse engineered to take the sting out of Tony Abbott's attack, and in that sense it's pretty smart politics.
But isn't the real question, and this is what I can't believe I'm sort of siding with Christine Milne a bit on this. But the question is it actually going to be effective policy? I mean, if your objective is to introduce this clean energy future, blah, 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 will this actually make it more likely? And the answer is no. The answer is no. And so the question then is, well, if it's not going to be, then what is the justification for taking this measure beyond political considerations? And that can't be answered.
No, I agree. I actually totally agree with that.
Reece, go on.
I'm mildly surprised that that Tim is so against the ETS, because clearly one of the main ideas and reasons for an ETS is to let the market decide it, so that there is as little government intervention as possible. It should be able to run itself. That's the idea and the thinking on it.
But I'm not disputing that with Reece, but when the government decides who has to buy the permits and the volume of supply, it's basically a purely regulatory measure.
But it's emitters. It's not hard to work out. You
no,
the government's deciding you emit and
Reece,
you don't.
Reece, you caught a cab to get to the South Bank studios in Melbourne.
No, I had a rickshaw that was driven by two IPA
But you and I
guys
both know that you didn't pay a carbon tax on the cost of those emissions directly. And so there is a difference between those who emit, and the government sets threshold levels, and some large emitters aren't included in those threshold levels.
Okay, let's for a look at what impact the changes to Labor's carbon pricing policy will have on emissions and investment. We're now joined by Tristan E.